All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Fasano from the Engineering Management Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session, How to Prepare a Winning Resume. This session is part of a multi-level career development webinar series that EMI is partnering with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers to bring to you over the next few months. You will have access to the slides and recording for this session if you'd like to have them. We'll send an evaluation out immediately after this session via email. We ask that you complete it and indicate in the evaluation that you would like the slides and recording, and we'll send them to you. Give us a few days for the recording to be prepared. And then at the end of the session, I'll tell you where you can register for the rest of the sessions in the series. All right, so let's jump right in here and start off with a quote. The challenge of life, I have found, is to build a resume that doesn't simply tell a story about what you want to be, but it's a story about who you want to be. And we'll talk about your resumes, of course, today and how you can make them really connect with the employers that you're applying to, because it is very important. And we're going to go through kind of a series of items. And before we jump into that, real quickly, I just want to introduce myself and let you get a feel for my background, which I think is important to be aware of. I am a licensed professional engineer. I have a bachelor's and a master's of science in engineering. And I found success at a young age in my career because what I realized was I wanted to be one of the leaders in my firm, which I'm sure that most engineers do. And when I looked at the leaders in the firm, I recognized that in addition to their technical skills, they had sound management skills. They could communicate effectively. They could network and build relationships. They could delegate effectively and manage teams. And so I developed all those skill sets. And one day, my company came to me and they said, Anthony, we love what you're doing. We'd like you to go around to the other offices and train our engineers on these skill sets. And my first response to them, of course, was, I don't think I can do that. I'm an engineer, not a trainer. But over time, I convinced myself to do it. And I went around to each of the offices. I did the training, and two things happened. Number one, I loved it. I really enjoyed helping these technical professionals develop these important skills that are often hard for us to learn. And secondly, my company started seeing awesome improvements in terms of project performance and team communication. And so at that point in time, I decided that I wanted to do executive coaching on a more regular basis. So I enrolled in coaching school in the evenings. I went to public speaking courses through Toastmasters, and I implemented a full coaching and training program within the engineering company that I worked for. And after about a year, it hit me that if there's this many engineers in this company alone that need help with these skills, there are thousands of them out there. And so at that time in 2009, I left my company. I started the Engineering Management Institute and have traveled around the world ever since, helping engineers become more effective managers and leaders. And I've also visited tons of engineering schools and spoken with a lot of students and younger engineers, which is where I built up a lot of the knowledge around building a winning resume, which is exactly what we're going to focus on today. So the purpose of today's session is to guide you in creating a resume that will stand out from the rest, especially in today's state of the economy where most engineering job openings receive hundreds of resumes and applications. And this session will specifically help you to learn to create a resume that will have that kind of pop and stand out. I'm going to talk about effectively providing non-engineering experience on your resume. Some other strategies for making the resume more powerful than the average resume, and also leveraging LinkedIn. I'm going to give you kind of an intro to LinkedIn that can give you a competitive advantage in your job search. The specific sections of today's session will be building the resume, customizing it. We'll talk about length and experience challenges, and then we'll get into LinkedIn towards the end of it. So I'm going to shut my cam off now so we can focus on the slides, and I'm going to start off by asking you a question. I'm talking a lot about building a winning resume, which is what we want to focus on. Well, what is a winning resume? How would you answer that question? You can go ahead and type in your answers. How would you define a winning resume? Because there's a few different ways to define it, and I'll tell you what I think it is in a moment. I'll take a second here to pause. I'd like you to define that for me. What is a winning resume? resume that gets you in the door. I like that one. Short, clear, concise. The one that gets you an interview. One that has keywords and the company is looking for. Yeah, different than others. Lands me my dream job. One that effectively expresses your skills, experiences, what exactly you have done, and how you made an impact. A resume that portrays your skills and qualifications for what the job is looking for. A winning resume is one that highlights your previous experience in a way that tells what you have done, who you are, and what you want to do. Okay, excellent. And I would say a winning resume is one that helps you land the job, but more specifically, a job interview, which I think was the first one that was said there. Because in today's world, I believe you need to get in the door. That's the first step. And if you do that, I'm going to give you some strategies today that'll help you do that. And then we're going to have another session on acing the interview coming up in our next session that can help you to nail the interview once you're in the door. But we got to focus on getting you in the door, and I think that's what a winning resume can do, in my opinion. So what I want you to think about as we go through this session is I want to try to give you some perspective from the other side of the table, from the people that will be reviewing your resume, to help you to build your resume effectively the way that they're going to want to read it. So there's one key fact that you must know about how your resumes are going to be read. Anyone want to take a guess at this? This is a critical thing that you need to know when you're preparing a resume. Something about how the reviewer is going to read your resume. And we got a couple answers here, top to bottom. It will just be skimmed, and that's the answer I was looking for. Thank you, David. The first pass, they're probably going to have 100 resumes, like I said before. They're going to scan through all 100 resumes and make a secondary pile of the ones they want to look through further. So you need to kind of pass that first litmus test of the 10-second review, let's call it. Okay, so knowing that, now that you know that they're going to give it a 10-second scan, what do you think is the most important thing you'll need to include in your approach to building your resume if you know that they're only going to scan it for 10 seconds? You have 10 seconds to impress them. How are you going to do that in general in your resume? What's one big picture thing you need to think about with your resume specifically? Someone says projects, job experience, most important. Right, but everyone has job experience, right? It's all going to be on there. So how's you going to stand out in 10 seconds? Including the skills they're looking for in the position, okay, customization, GPA, job experience, white space so you don't overwhelm them, your name, skill sets, skills, proper formatting, contact info, qualifications. Okay, the one that's probably closest to what I'm thinking is that formatting, right? If they're going to scan your resume in 10 seconds, scan 100 of them, 10 seconds each, the visual presentation is going to be very important. It's got to be neat. It's got to be easy to read, maybe contain some key points. Okay, and I'm going to elaborate more on this in the next few slides, but just think about it right off the bat. If I can't quickly digest things on your resume in 10 seconds, I'm not going to be able to get to them. It'll be too much information for me. It'll be information overload. So yes, the idea of matching skill sets and customizing is all really important, but even before that, it just has to be very simple, laid out very simple, easy to read, certain things that pop. Now, we'll come back to that in a second. But the other thing that you need to think about in terms of the big picture approach to building your resume, you'll need to know this point. Executives are looking for resumes, or HR professional, whoever's doing the review, they're looking for resumes that match up to their company's needs. So you need to customize your resume. You need to use some of the same words from the job description. You need to explain how you have experience that will specifically help them. Now, let me give you a story here real quickly, or kind of an analogy to emphasize this. It's kind of silly, but I think it makes the point. Let's say you were to go to the supermarket and you walked in and you wanted to get some milk. Well, you go in there to buy milk. You see someone that works there, you walk right up to them and you said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for milk. Can you tell me where I can find milk?" And they say to you, "You know what, I'm sorry, we don't have any milk, but we have tomatoes. Would you like some tomatoes?" What are you going to do? Probably going to leave. You don't come for tomatoes, you came for milk. Now, if you walked in and said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for some milk. Can you tell me where I can find milk, or do you have any milk?" They're going to say, "Oh, yeah, sure, it's in aisle 12. What's the next step?" You go to aisle 12, you buy the milk. The point of that and that kind of story there is, if you give somebody a resume with a whole bunch of information that doesn't correspond to what their needs are, it's not going to interest them. But if you figure out what their needs are and you cater the resume to that, then they may become a buyer. In fact, if you have what they need, the only reason that they wouldn't hire you, quite frankly, is maybe salary or some other issue that might come up, right? Because if they're looking for something and you have it, then it will dramatically increase the possibilities that they hire you. That's why it's extremely important to customize a resume. And I tell people that if you're applying to 10 companies, you should have 10 resumes. 50 companies, 50 resumes. I know it's a lot of work, but we're talking about differentiating yourself. And I see a question that came in saying that it's hard to get, I guess to make it neat and simple when you have a lot of experience. We'll address that in a few minutes. We're going to talk about length of the resume. All right, so let's get back to some of the nuts and bolts of the resume building process here. And let me give you a formula. Here's a formula for building that winning resume. First of all, include your contact information in the header if you're using like a Microsoft Word document. And I'm going to put some samples on the screen of my resume in a minute. But by doing this, it does two things for you. Number one, it can save you space. Some people have this big header at the top, or this big, their name, their address, their email, and they put it on the top of the document and pushes everything down. By cutting and pasting it into the header, it moves it up towards the top of the page and probably gets you another inch or so on your resume, number one. And number two, if you have a multi-page resume, and I'll tell you later on when we talk about length when you should have a multi-page resume, that the information will be on every page. So if for some reason your resume got separated, it would be able to see that it's both yours. Number two, ensure the layout of your resume is consistent and the text is justified. I'm talking specifically about the formatting here. And again, I'll show you a sample in a minute. However, there's no like specific template, like the perfect correct template to build a resume, right? As long as it's neat and readable and flows the same way, then it'll work. You want to place your most relevant work experience on the top of your resume, unless, of course, it was something that you worked on many, 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 many years ago. But for the most part, remember what I said. If they're scanning it, they want to see experience that's relevant to their needs and the job that they have open. I recommend that you use numbers where applicable. What do I mean by that? If you worked on a project team and you did a design for a project that was had a budget of $200 million for the federal government or something along those lines, put the numbers in your resume. I worked on a team of 10 designers working under a budget of X million dollars to design this part. Technical professionals and engineers like numbers. They like to quantify things. And it can also give them the idea of the scope of some of the items that you've worked on. Bold, important items that you want to stand out. Remember, you have 10 seconds. So if you have 10 seconds, something has to pop. Maybe you're popping the items that closely match up to their needs. You can see kind of the direction we're going in here. Here's another one that you may disagree with, but everyone has an objective often on the top of their resume. It takes up 2 or 3 sentences. It takes up a lot of space, quite frankly. And here's the thing about objectives. Everybody has the same objective. It's to find a job. So in 10 seconds, they're skipping your objective. They're not reading the objective. So unless you have something that's very creative about yourself that really stands out from other people that you're going to put as like an opening statement or objective at the top, you can lose the objective because it's most likely not helping you that much. And last but certainly not least is to have somebody proofread your resume, and preferably not an engineering professional. Someone with English grammar experience that can check the resume for any kind of grammatical errors, that can just give it a read for flow, that doesn't have any bias or doesn't know the content on the resume. All right, now let me flash through some samples of my own resume from a while back. And while I'm doing that, feel free to put any questions in that you have around the items that we just went through in terms of building the resume. So I have my name at the top, credentials. And again, if you want to put your contact info in, you could put it in there and you could put it up in the header. I have my professional experience is what I'm calling it. I have the name of the company, the location, the timeline on the right side that I worked for that company, the title underneath it, and then bullet points describing my responsibilities at that time. A couple items bolded in the bullets. You can see though it's just consistent. Here's the next job, same way. I did it the same way. So if you have the date on this side, on the other one, it's not clean and flowing. I had a section on my resume for professional licenses, memberships, and affiliations. Going down the page here, society activities, my nonprofit association, my volunteer work. I had a section for publications, different books I've written. And at this point in time, I had my education towards the bottom of my resume because I had been out of school for a while. I put my coaching certificate, my master's, my undergraduate. I also did a research independent study project during my master's degree, so I included that under research on my resume. I also had a section on awards and certifications and codes and manuals and materials that I was familiar with. I have a question here that came in. What if we had skills and qualifications section at the top, then education section following? Would those come before or after present professional experience? It's a good question, and this gets into the whole idea of you have some leeway here. There's no specific set standard. If you are in school right now and your only experience is intern experience, then I would consider doing the education first, the experience second, and the skills and qualifications at the bottom. And if you do go with some kind of an opening statement or an objective, if you feel you have something that differentiates yourself about your internship, I would focus on that, because the key thing is going to be your professional experience. Another question that I get all the time is just came up. What if your GPA isn't that high? Would you still put it on or leave it out? It's a good question, and I don't know if a 3.0 is high or not. That's what I had in college. I think that's around a B, right? So here's what I would say about that. Two things. Number one, if you think it could potentially hurt you, I would leave it off. Right? That's kind of, again, it's a little bit subjective because who knows what's going to hurt you, right? If you think it's lower than it should be and it's not going to help you, you can leave it off. Just be prepared to discuss it if they ask you about it. The other thing I can tell you is I worked for an engineering company and I did some hiring. I did some interviewing and some hiring. And never in my entire time doing that do I remember us ever focusing on someone's GPA. It's not to say that we didn't look at it or consider it, but it wasn't the primary thing that we considered. We considered their work experience, their personality, the way they interviewed, the way they carried themselves, maybe the computer programs that they knew, like an AutoCAD or something like that. So If you think it has an ability to hurt you, I would say leave it off and be prepared to discuss it. Um, and like I said, if you have other skills like experience, computer experience, software experience, work experience, I think you can overcome it. What fonts are you using? So I used here, I believe it was Georgia or Calibri. I think they're both very readable. Some people might also use Arial. I think it looks a little bit more like straight lines, but it's up to you. I think Calibri and Georgia read very well, from my opinion. Another question, I've worked in different areas in industry and in universities as a researcher. So if I'm applying to a company, I have to put only my industry experience. So to create two different resumes for industry and academy. No, I don't think you need to do that. I think you can have two separate sections of your resume, and we'll cover that in a minute, but industry experience and academic experience, and just list them separately. This way they can focus on which one they want to look at. Another question, in the experience section, is it better to lean towards listing fewer experiences with more accomplishments and duties, or more experiences if you have them with 2 or 3 accomplishments each? Again, it depends on what they are. So if you have one job that's very relevant to the job at hand, or to the job you're applying for, I would make that a more robust listing. I would put that on there, show how, all the stuff you did on that, and then maybe have the other couple ones on there, but just don't have as many bullet points underneath them. You want to always think about catering it best to the company's needs that you're applying to. How do you handle time gaps on your experience? We're going to talk about that in a minute. How to make a resume if you're applying for your first job. All these things apply to a first job as well. I mean, the key thing with the first job is you want to, if you have any internship experience at all or any kind of experience, you should put it on there. If you don't, you need to focus on your skills, qualifications, computer softwares, courses you've taken, degrees that you have. Everything else you have to focus on. But you always want to think of something that will differentiate you. I'm going to leave that time gap one on there for a minute as a question. We'll come back to that. All right, so let's get into the proper length of a resume and how you can kind of make yours fit accordingly. My recommendation is, actually, hold on one second here. So for students, I recommend that your resume be no longer than 1 page. If you're in the first 5, maybe 5 to 10 years of your career, it might go up to 2 to 3 pages. And if you have over 10 years of working experience, you could potentially be up to 5 to 10 pages or more, because now you start submitting project descriptions and budgets and all that stuff. So the next question, of course, will be, how do we fit everything? So here are some tips for keeping the resume at a reasonable length. And some of these we touched on when we talked about building a resume. The first one we touched on, keep the contact information in the header. Remove the objective unless it's useful or contains important information. You don't really need the references available upon request line on the bottom of your resume anymore. That's something that is just understood these days. However, what you should do is if you go to an interview, you should bring a list of references and have it in your folder with you. So if they ask, you can hand it to them. Also, what you can do is you can eliminate some of the projects or experience that you have that are not relevant to the position, or you could just list them and not elaborate on them if you're really tight for space. And lastly, kind of as a last resort, you can reduce your margin size a little bit and play around with that. Question here, for PhD students, can we exceed a 1-page limit? Yeah, I would say that's a case where, as a PhD student, you're going to put some information about your thesis and things of that nature. So you could, for that, I would say you'd be able to exceed 1 page, yes. Are there any other questions? I'll pause for a minute here. I know we covered a lot of information. We are going to still talk about putting non-engineering experience on your resume in a minute, but I just want to pause here for 30 seconds and give time for questions. Okay, I see a question about masters. I guess similar type of question for the PhD to masters. I mean, if you did a full-time master's right after your undergraduate degree, I mean, I can't see how you would need that much room for that. So I would still try to keep it to one if you can. If you have to elaborate and you had a special project with your master's or something, then that may be acceptable. If you have no internship or any experience, as I said earlier, you got to focus then on your skills, your qualifications, your degrees, courses you took, maybe any professional associations like ASME memberships or volunteer work. You have to lean on other things. What colors and images are recommended? I'd say none. I'd keep it simple with black and white because it would probably be photocopied. And I really don't think you need to put an image or a photo on. Most people don't. I would kind of recommend, again, it could get distorted, printed. I mentioned the master's degree one. Should we add photos, candidate's photo? Again, I would say no. I mean, if you have a very professional photo and you want to try to differentiate yourself and put it on there, you can. I personally just think it's risky because no one does it. And I would hope that no one would judge you by the way you look. But, you know, again, I'm trying to minimize any risks you have. I have a section on my resume called Demonstration of Passions where I talked about online courses I took on my own time and their relevance to the position. What do you think about that? They mentioned specific skills I learned and knowledge I gained. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And if you can fit it, I think it's great. And I would just, again, customize it. So if there's skills that you learn that specifically would be beneficial to this company for this specific challenge or need that they have, then make sure to cater them to that. Can I write an objective as it's my dream job to make my resume a bit longer with work experience from your company? I mean, you can. It seems to me like they're not going to pay that much attention to that. You know, they're going to focus on the content. Should we include our LinkedIn link? You can do that. If you have a LinkedIn profile you're very happy with, you have recommendations on there, and you want to put it at the bottom of your resume, you can do that. I would just recommend that if you do that, your LinkedIn profile better be polished up good, and we're going to go over that in a few minutes here. If I have a website portfolio of projects, how should I put that in your resume? Put it at the bottom. You could say something for projects and more information. Visit this link, something like that. All right, my last point on resumes here, because I want to get into LinkedIn. How to effectively provide non-engineering experience on your resume. Let's say, for example, you worked at McDonald's for a summer, right? And your job was kind of working the drive-through window, making sure the customers were happy with their food, you know, providing customer service. You know, you might think like, hey, I'm not going to put that on my resume, but there might be some value on that for your resume, right? In the interaction with customers and clients, which might be something you have to do as an engineer. So what you could do is you could do it in one of two ways. I recommend having two sections on your resume, engineering experience and non-engineering experience, or you could call it related experience or non-related experience. And I would put like the McDonald's under, you know, non-engineering experience, and I would write in my description something to the effect of, I worked at McDonald's for the summer and my job was making sure the customers were happy with the product. I feel that this lesson in customer service will be extremely helpful for me in my engineering career. So I would tie what you learned at McDonald's to engineering and how it's going to help you. Because a company might say, "Wow, Anthony's already worked in customer service at a young age. That's going to help him dealing with our customers." And then the last point on the specific on the resume is you got to be honest. Always be truthful on your resume because people are going to figure things out, and if you're not truthful on it, they will maybe find out one day, and that's that's something that's gonna really build up a bad reputation for yourself. Um, we had a question before about time gaps on your work experience. Again, if you have a big time gap, I think you need to include it on your resume. Not specifically include it, but people will see it there, and you just need to be prepared to be honest and talk about it. I took some time off, I traveled around, I learned a lot, and then I got refocused and I came back. Or, I took time off to raise a kid, and now I'm back and I'm refocused. Now, the only time that I think you can get away with maybe leaving something off your resume, so to speak, is if you took a new job and you worked there for like 3 to 6 months and it just didn't go well, like problems happened between you and the company, it wasn't a good experience, so you left there and you were going to take another job, or you did take another job. I think that 3 to 6 month thing, as long as it was just like a one-time anomaly, can just be left off the resume. I don't think it's fair to you or the company if it was just a short thing, kind of like a trial thing. Because one thing you need to be aware of is if there's a lot of different jobs on there, companies also don't like that. Like, why is this person moving around so much? All right, let's transition into talking about LinkedIn now. We got about a little less than 30 minutes left, and I want to get through the LinkedIn stuff, and then if there's any other questions, we'll open it up. Also, for those of you that weren't on the call earlier, the slides and the recording will be available, but you need to indicate you're interested in them on the evaluation we're going to send around just a couple minutes after the session. You'll get the evaluation form and fill that out. Indicate in the evaluation form that, yes, you want the slides and recording, and we will send them to you. Give us a few days to do that. All right, we're going to get into LinkedIn now. LinkedIn can give you a competitive advantage in the job market for sure. Student, recent grad, any experience level. So I'm going to walk you through some steps that you can take specifically to build your LinkedIn profile. And what I recommend that you do as well is you can get the recording from this and you can watch it while you pause it and go through each one of these steps, and you'll be good in about half an hour. You'll have an updated profile. You want to complete your profile, including your photo. This is really important. You want to use a professional photo. I hope I don't have to tell you that, but I cannot tell you how many times I see people with their pets, dogs. I've seen someone drinking a beer on their profile, all kinds of crazy stuff. The way to think about this, and we had a question about this earlier, if you were to put a photo on your resume, which I don't recommend, but if you were to put one on there, that's the type of photo that you want to use on your LinkedIn profile. If you don't have the time or the resources to go to a studio to get a professional photo done, just put a nice outfit on and have someone grab your cell phone and take a photo of you. Simple. But it's important because you know how it is when you go to someone's LinkedIn profile and there is no photo, you feel like you can't really make a good connection with that person. You can easily Google the template for the photos, so you can also put a nice photo in the back. Like I put a quote, you might put a photo of a project you're working on, or you on a project site or something like that. You can easily get those dimensions. One thing also to be aware of is your profile is visible to those who are not on LinkedIn. So I did a search for my name and LinkedIn came up and I clicked on it in a browser where I wasn't logged into LinkedIn, and this is what showed up. Kind of my title, some of the stuff I have listed there, and then it says, click here to view Anthony's full profile and like log into LinkedIn. So remember that once you start a profile on LinkedIn, it is going to be public to some portions of it, so you should really make sure that you take the time. The focus on it. So here I see a question that came in, which I'll get to here. You want to craft an eye-opening summary. Summary is what you see there, right, kind of on the profile box. My summary says, are you a highly effective engineering manager? If yes, I commend you. If not, I challenge you and want to help you. Ever since I stopped practicing engineering myself, I have dedicated my career to helping engineers build their managerial skills to become powerful leaders, and now I want to help you. And then I just go down to some more stuff and I invite them to connect. But the point is that you don't want to think about this in terms of, let's assume that someone comes to your LinkedIn profile, reads this summary for 30 seconds and navigates away. That's most of the time what people do. So you need to be prepared for that. And you need to write a powerful summary. And the question I had here was, should your bio or summary be first person or third person? I prefer to keep it personal, first person, so like I'm talking to the person, as opposed to third person where it's someone talking about me. That's just my personal preference. Can everyone see the slide with my craft and eye-opening summary on it? Or can you just say yes if, oh no, okay. I'm sorry, let me exit out and come back into my PowerPoint, and then let's see. Can just give me a, can you see my LinkedIn slide now? Yes or no? That's weird. I'm advancing the slides and you can't see them. Okay. All right, let's see if I do this. Can you see it now, even though I'm not in full maximize screen? All right, I'm going to try one other thing. Okay, now you see it. Sorry about that. I had to undo that. I don't know why. All right, let me just quickly run back then so you could see what you missed, which wasn't a lot. We just talked about the non-related experience. There was nothing on the slide of interest to you other than photos and importance of honesty. And then we got into the LinkedIn. I showed my professional photo and I was speaking about that. And the background image mentioned that there's templates online. Mentioned that your profile is public. And then we got into the crafting the eye-opening summary. And I read a little bit of my summary. And I talked about that. And I was just saying, remember, assume that someone's going to come to your profile, read it for 30 seconds, and leave. And I'm going to put one up on the screen here. I blocked out the name, but this is a friend of mine, and I asked him if we could read his, and he was okay with it, and has his company name and stuff. But he was looking for a job, and so I worked with him to write like a very eye-opening summary. I won't read the whole thing here, but it starts, you can see how it starts. Growing up around my father, who worked as a structural engineer, my intrinsic conundrum of how from a pile of dust a structure is erected was morphed into a burning desire for engineering practice in the subsequent years of my life's alchemy. So you could see that that's going to grab someone. And then he wrote some other things. And he changed it a little bit since he got the job, but we worked hard on his summary to grab people when they came to his profile. He's got something around here how he speaks 4 languages and things of that nature. So again, benefits to whoever might be interested in having you work with them. This is all part of the first step here. Another thing that you want to think about is your personalizing your LinkedIn URL. You should do this immediately. If you go onto the home page on LinkedIn, you'll see something on the right here, edit public profile and URL. When you sign up for LinkedIn, this is randomly generated, but you can click the little pencil that you see here, the blue pencil, and you can edit it. And I recommend using first name, last name if it's available, so it's easy for you to remember and for someone else to remember. And the reason that this is important is because many people say that within the next few years, and this is already happening, that many people will have the LinkedIn URLs on their business cards. And you could say to someone, hey, connect with me on LinkedIn, Anthony J. Fasano. It's a very important thing that a lot of people don't realize. They stick with the randomly generated one just because they're not aware of it. It's a good idea to update your status on a regular basis with value. So you may be an engineering student, but you may have knowledge to certain new trends, new softwares, some articles that you read about, and you want to post them there, showing people that you're plugged into the industry and you're providing some value to them through your feed. Just like on Facebook, how you can do posts, you can create posts on LinkedIn. Now, the other thing that you could do that I would highly recommend, especially for those of you that are out there that are doing a PhD or a master's and you have some research, you can write some articles too. By just going to the home page and clicking write an article, and you can put a photo in it, you can put a title, you can write something, it shows up right on your profile, and you can write it for your target audience. So for me, I do a lot of management and leadership training for engineers. So I have an article here, great managers communicate differently with different people by doing this. Put a nice photo in there, put a nice headline, and pulls people in, and they show you the statistics and things of that nature. But what you're doing is you're building expertise in a specific field. And so it's very easy for you to build this expertise using a tool like LinkedIn. Question here, actually it's a resume question, so I'll come back to it at the end. I'll keep going on LinkedIn. Now let's get into a title. I see a question here about a headline or a title for your LinkedIn profile. This is very important. You need to create a thoughtful title and update it regularly. The thing about the title is that, and you can't see it here, I guess it got blocked out. His says structural engineer. Mine says best-selling author, TEDx speaker, trainer, and executive coach for engineers. So what you want to think about when you create this title is think in reverse. So imagine someone came into LinkedIn, they put a zip code in, they said, I want to do a search within 20 miles of this zip code, and I'm putting these keywords in, executive coach for engineers. I'm probably going to come up if they do that. So if you have, mechanical engineer with a certain discipline or another word that you want it to go along with it, use that in your title. You can also have multiple titles. So I do a lot of coaching in the civil engineering realm, and I see people put civil engineer, transportation engineer, soils engineer. I mean, they really kind of are just a civil engineer with a lot of different disciplines, and they list them all in case someone's doing a search that way. So you should really think about that in terms of the different jobs or roles that you have. Mechanical engineering student, mechanical engineering intern. And in fact, one time, my wife was an engineer and she was unemployed at the time. And I knew that she probably wasn't going to be happy when I made this recommendation to her, but I recommended that she put unemployed engineer in her title line. Because what happens if there's a recruiter looking for an unemployed engineer? And believe it or not, about 24 hours later, she got contacted by a recruiter who had a good company that was looking for an engineer in her discipline. She did an interview and she got the job. So the search engines are important and the keywords. Most likely, most of you probably don't have company websites. Some of you might have portfolio websites. You can include them in your contact information. And when you do include them in your contact information, there's options for company website, personal website, or other. If you click other, you can write whatever you want in there. So for example, I wrote upcoming webinar for engineers, and then I put the link in. If I would have chose company website, when it displays on my profile, it would say just literally company website as opposed to upcoming webinar for engineers, book for engineers. So you're able to customize the descriptions of your website. So instead of putting personal website, you might select other and type personal project portfolio, and then it links to it. It's pretty powerful. These are all little things that add up. You want to make sure that you set your email settings according to whatever your goals are. Sometimes it's annoying to get notifications from all the group notifications in your LinkedIn groups, so you would adjust that accordingly. But if you get direct inbox messages, you may want to have them be copied to your email. What if a company contacts you and they want to hire you and you don't see their message because you have the messages shut off and you don't check your LinkedIn inbox that often? You can also add skills and seek endorsements if you'd like as well. These things are a little bit tricky because someone can endorse you for anything, even if you're not good at it. But there's a way now that you can accept or turn those off on your profile. I'm not going to go crazy into this right now because a lot of this is going to maybe be more for when you're out into your career. And I want to get back on track so we could take some questions at the end on resumes if we need to, but I want to run through the rest of these steps quickly. The next thing you want to do is connect with people you know on LinkedIn. That's a good way to start. And the easiest way to do that is to use the LinkedIn network importer. Just click on network on LinkedIn, and you see you can put your email address in here and hit continue, and it'll search through your email contacts. And any of them that are on LinkedIn will send them invites for you. I mean, I know it's a little bit like generic, but it's a good way to get you out of the gate quickly without having to go and find all your colleagues. Step number 3, if you want to use LinkedIn effectively, think about your target audience. For a lot of you, it will be the companies that you're targeting that you want to hire you. You need to think about this because just like you want to customize your resume, you want to customize your LinkedIn profile and the content that you're sharing to speak to those that you want to find you. Makes sense, right? So that's something that I think is very, very important, and you need to think about it, because if you're just going to share stuff and people in your target audience aren't interested, you're just wasting your time. Number 4, let's get into groups. I see there's a question about groups. LinkedIn has an amazing amount of groups. A group is just like Facebook. They're groups around certain topics that have been created to bring people together to discuss specific topics. You can type in anything: mechanical engineers, mechanical engineering students, mechanical engineering interns, mechanical engineering companies, and you'll probably find lots of different groups. Join the ones that, again, will house the people in your target audience. Here's the coolest thing about groups, the LinkedIn groups. Think about it this way. Where can you get in front of millions of people, thousands or millions of people in the same discipline in a matter of minutes? LinkedIn groups. Very powerful. Now, I will say that sometimes the groups get kind of jammed up and they're a little overwhelming and the stuff posted isn't very valuable. That's why it's worth the time to comb through and find the groups that are right for you that you can take something out. Now, the first step is finding a group and joining a group, but then you need to participate in the groups. Participate in the discussions in the groups. So I'm in a lot of civil engineering groups just because by background I am a civil engineer. And so I was in a civil engineering group and I wrote an article called 5 Reasons All Civil Engineers Should Gain Field Experience. And I posted it with some photos of myself, personal spin on it, 785 likes and 80 comments. So being involved and participating in groups and putting in valuable content that's of interest to the people in the groups can build you, again, a reputation and some credibility in the groups. Now, you may not have 80 comments, but again, people are seeing it and they're associating you with this certain type of stuff you're posting. You're building a brand, you're building a reputation. Now, here's where the magic happens. What you can start to do is you can start to connect with people using these group discussions. So as opposed to going into a mechanical engineering companies group and just trying to connect with HR people in that group, if you get involved in a discussion and you're going back and forth with someone, you can then connect with them and say, Mary, I really enjoyed our conversation in this discussion. I would like to connect with you. Now you're building up. You see how this is working? Now you're building up a network of people in your target audience because of engagement that you're having through LinkedIn. And I think the key thing is I would keep it simple on the groups for now. Pick just a 1 or 2. Pick a couple and spend some time in this as opposed to joining 50 and not doing anything in any of them. I see a couple questions there. I'm going to wait just till the end because we're going to address those. And then number 7, start building relationships. Right now you're making these strategic connections and you want to build the relationships with these people, meaning from now every now and then you send them a message on LinkedIn. If there's someone local, you could even get on the phone with them potentially, right? It doesn't have to be limited to LinkedIn. That could be a starting point potentially. But just having a LinkedIn connection isn't a relationship. Then you have to build the relationship. You're building strategic connections that can be leveraged for different opportunities in your career, one of them being a job interview. Now, real quickly before I do a summary at the end here, here's some of the do's and don'ts for LinkedIn, just to summarize that. Do engage in as many discussions as possible and try to target ones where hiring managers and HR professionals are present. Do provide thoughtful remarks in these discussions, not something as simple as, is anyone hiring? Do try to connect with key people after and only after you were involved in a discussion with them, not just cold. Don't start connecting with hiring managers and HR professionals as soon as you join a group. Remember, you want to make that connection with them. Don't start messaging hiring managers and HR professionals in the group just asking for a job. Don't just join larger groups. You can get some really powerful interactions through these smaller, more close-knit groups. Don't bother people by being excessive with your posts, discussions, or messages. Here are some of the key takeaways that you want to think about throughout your job search. You want to think about your length of resume, of course, making it pop with the 10 seconds. You want to be honest throughout the job search. You have to build that strong presence and network on LinkedIn and really leverage the LinkedIn groups to find these new key opportunities, right? But really the overall thing that I can impart upon you is speak to the needs of the employer. If they need something and you have it, your chances of getting hired are dramatically higher than the next person. And it's all up to you as to how you present that. So any questions you have, you can put them in now. I'm going to just put up on the screen 2 things. One, our website, engineeringmanagementinstitute.org. We've got hundreds of podcast episodes and videos, all related to engineering career development that you can take advantage of. Also, go.asme.org/career-webinars. You can sign up for the next session in this mini course, which is going to focus on acing that interview. You're going to love that one. So make sure you go there and check that out. We'll also put the link in the email we're going to send you with the evaluation. All right, question. Would you recommend LinkedIn Premium, especially for a student about to graduate? It's a good question. I mean, the LinkedIn Premium is it's nothing extraordinary, quite frankly. You could probably start without it and do all the things that I told you to do. Build your resume the right way, join the right groups, interact with people. The only thing the premium might help you do is to get access to some more people through searches and things of that nature, but I would try to go without it first and just follow the exact steps that I gave you here. And if you find that that's not working, you need to really leverage more of a search engine, then you might look at the premium. But I've never really, I mean, I have it, but I don't use it that much, honestly. If you are the president of an engineering organization at your university, can you put that in experience, or should you put that under education? This is for LinkedIn. It's a good question. I think that there's a section for volunteer organizations, and you could put that in there. You could also list it as an experience if you'd like. Like, for example, ASME chapter president 2018 to present. You can list that as a job experience section or in the volunteer section. Whatever you think looks better. I think both are acceptable. All right, does having an affiliation with an NGO or an organization that does humanitarian activities make any difference in your resume? Absolutely. I think it's a great thing to put on there. It says a lot about you. That's something I would definitely have somewhere in my resume. I would make it very obvious to people. May even be something worthy of being mentioned in that opening statement or objective that we talked about. right, I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you for your time today. Your questions were great. Your interaction was great. We'll send the evaluation out in a few minutes. I ask you to please leave any feedback you have so we can continue to give feedback to ASME and continue to improve the program for you. And also just indicate in that evaluation that yes, you would like the slides and the recording, and we'll send them to you. Just give us a few days so we could take the recording and get it down and make sure that it works. Oh, a couple questions came in real quick. Let me go through them. Being part of the student government count as experience. I would list it as volunteer experience. How to initiate conversations on LinkedIn with any professional? Do it through the group discussions like we talked about. Get into a group, start a discussion, or chime in on a discussion. That's the best way to do it. How long should you keep an award like Eagle Scout on your resume? Personally, I would keep Eagle Scout on your resume for your entire life. An Eagle Scout is something that stands out tremendously, and people says a lot about someone regardless of how old they are. Yeah, I mean, if you have a freshman, you're not going to have a lot of experience, but you just have to build it up. So put whatever experience you do have in terms of your degrees and certifications and things of that nature. Well, here's a good question. How do you get LinkedIn references? I didn't mention that. You can get what's called LinkedIn recommendations. They have to be someone that you're connected to, and you can go in and request a recommendation. I won't go through it here online, but you can Google how to do it. I recommend if you're a student, seek a recommendation from either a supervisor in an internship that you had or a professor. I think that's a great start for you in terms of recommendations. Yeah, you would definitely want to include ASME in your profile under volunteer organizations. I don't think you need to put high school in there per se. If you want to put the title of your high school, you can. I think the recommendations on LinkedIn, someone's asking about how effective the recommendations on LinkedIn are. I believe they're effective in that they have to be done by that third party, by that other person. It can't be something that you post on your own profile. So to me, that's some credibility. All right, everyone, we're just about out of time today. I hope you found that to be helpful. We'll get the recording posted for you. Please leave your feedback in the evaluation, and I thank you for spending the time with us today. Thank you, everyone.